Good evening, everybody. Hi, Jeff. How are you, dear?
Hi, I am fantastic. How are you?
Good. A
Hmm.
little flustered, because I am no fan of technology, and yet it's a double-edged sword. I can't do what I do without it. And so tonight I'm having to wear earbuds because one setting is off somewhere,
Yep.
and we cannot find where it is. So, there's no point in trying to do a show where you can hear me, but I can't hear you. That really has a negative impact
That would
on.
prove difficult.
Yes,
An
yes.
interesting experiment in our ability to lip read, but
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I'm a little bent out of shape with
okay.
technology right now.
Well, the earbuds look great on you.
No,
You
thank
look
you.
you look wonderful, and it's a pleasure to be. You look great, and I'm so happy to be here with you tonight. Technological issues notwithstanding.
Yeah, well, it looks like I'm stuck with them for the whole night. So there's
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so class is in session and we've had a lot to learn this week. These things feel so weird. Not a fan.
I am not either.
Not a
Not one
fan.
bit. Yep, I understand.
Uh, but anyway, I wanted to start tonight. I was very dramatically impacted by a statement that the Pope released on Christmas Eve. And it really shook me, um, but in a strangely positive way, where what he said resonated with me, and it tapped into that part of me that's like, yes, yes, that's the truth. The truth when you hear the truth, and it
Yes.
was the
Yep.
truth. And so Pope Francis put a message out to the world on Christmas Eve when uh, Bethlehem, Jerusalem, Church of the Holy Sepulchre, all shut down, surrounded by armed guards on Christmas Eve this year. And this is what he wrote. Tonight, our hearts are in Bethlehem, where the Prince of Peace is once more rejected by the futile logic of war, by the clash of arms that even today prevents him from finding room in the world.
Hmm.
No room at the inn. And that's what 2023 has been, a nightmare of war and death and destruction and more destruction and more destruction and threat of nuclear war and threats of blowing up nuclear power plants and ships exploding and bridges exploding and people dying by the thousands and the thousands and the countless thousands. Innocent civilians targeted directly, deliberately. And today was no different.
Hmm.
Ukraine took a hell of a hit today, no doubt in retaliation for blowing up a ship in Crimea. And, pardon me for asking such a rhetorical question, but I look back on recorded history, going all the way back to the celebrated birth of Jesus Christ. And far beyond that, And I look back and I have to ask, what have we learned? Why is this still happening? Why is this still happening? We know better. We know better. And yet war is oh, I almost cut my fingers off on Christmas Day. It was really great. There was blood everywhere. It was fabulous.
Oh
I
wow.
didn't have to do any more cooking. All I had to do was just hold my hand up and try to get the blood to stop.
Well, that's
And
one way of getting out of it, but I'm
it
really sorry
was.
that was the way. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't that painful.
Mm,
I mean, it was almost, not quite, but it was almost worth it.
yeah.
Yeah, so I have green bandages on to remind me not to plunge these particular fingers into, anything that could cause me to get
Mm,
something toxic. I don't know.
mm.
I don't know. Yeah, it's been a week. It has. Did you enjoy your Christmas? Did you have a nice time?
I did, I really did. It was one of those seasons where it really didn't feel too much like Christmas to me
I know,
up
me too.
until there was just so much going on,
Yeah.
pardon me. We've all been kind of sick around here. There's
Yeah.
just been a lot of busyness and tumult, and it really didn't start to feel like it to me until around, the evening of Christmas Eve, as it started
Mhm.
to get dark, and then I kind of started to feel it, even just down to it being an uncharacteristically warm winter for us. I mean, it was 50 degrees on Christmas Day and rainy and
Mhm.
foggy, and but
Pretty.
it was, yeah, for you that's probably a cold day. But for us it was just weird. We usually have snow, but no, we had a beautiful Christmas, actually, I have to say, and I thoroughly enjoyed every second of it. And I'm a kid at heart, and I go out of my way. As old as my children are now, my oldest is an adult. She's in college. My middle graduates this year. My youngest is in 8th grade. They're all older, but I still see myself as a guardian of my children's wonder. And
Mhm.
as their father, that's one of the primary places I see myself holding in their life, is I always want to be the one who guards their sense of wonder and awe of the world. And so I take great joy in enacting and embodying the role of Saint Nicholas on Christmas Eve, and them waking up to the magic that is Christmas, despite all the hell that's going on in the world around them, that they're all very well aware of,
Yeah.
um, in ways that I wouldn't have been aware of as a child, because I didn't have the inundation of social media, whereas they see it. Even if I try to keep them from it, they see it. And so, no matter how old they get, I always see myself as really playing that role. And I was talking to someone about it the other day, about how, some people are like, well, Christmas just isn't the same now that I'm an adult. And I was like, well, no, it's not the same, but actually to me, it's more magical. It's more magical to me now that I'm an adult, because I see that it being magical is really my responsibility. It really is up to me whether or not it's
Yeah.
magical, whether or not, I choose to make it so or not. And I'm just, I don't mean to sound arrogant or anyway. I'm
You're
glad that
not.
my
You don't.
children have, I'm glad that my children are blessed enough to be in a situation where they can experience Christmas in this way.
Mhm.
And whereas that's not the case in a lot of the world right now. Yesterday, for example, was the fourth day of the 13 day feast of Christmas. It starts on Christmas Day and it ends with Epiphany. Christmas Day being the first. We often say the 12 days of Christmas, but it's 13 when you include when Christmas itself. But yesterday was the fourth day of Christmas, which is the Feast of the Holy Innocents, that observes and that honors in the Gospel of Luke the account of Herod slaughtering the other children under a certain age, that
Yeah.
just in
Any
case maybe
boy less
yeah,
than
yep,
2
which
years old, I
mirrors
believe.
the Mosaic story and what Pharaoh did supposedly. But it's the honoring of that event, and that just made me think of my own children, and how what a what a heavy but light burden it is to be one who is charged with guarding their sense of purity and wonder and innocence, and helping them look at a world that is brutal, and help them not be brutalized by it. You know, it's a heavy but light burden. It's heavy in the sense that, well, it's just heavy. It's light in the sense that it's a joy. And so my Christmas was amazing because it was one more year of getting to do that for my family. And when so many aren't able to experience that around the world. And it's one of those things, where you're, as a Westerner, as a privileged individual, which I am, sometimes you're tempted to feel guilt over that.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's okay. Um, in fact, it's really the fact that you do means that you deserve the joy that comes in those moments. If you didn't, you probably need a little bit more deprivation than you have. But the fact that you feel it means that you're allowed those moments, right?
Yeah.
And last week we were actually talking, and I texted you, and I was like, "Remind me to tell you about the Princess and the Pea." I don't know if
Hmm.
you remember that.
I do.
But last week when you were talking, and you were talking about Princess Peanut Buttercup, you said those words, and when you said it, I specifically saw the fairy tale of the princess and the pea in my mind just because of the wordplay.
Hmm.
And one of the symbolic meanings of the princess and the pea, the archetypal meanings, is there's I can't even remember all the details of it now, but it's something like a girl who stays at this castle for the night, and or they're trying to see if she's worthy to be the princess or whatever, right? To marry the prince. Lucky her, right? And part of the test is,
She
but
doesn't have to be a whore on the streets. She can, actually
this
have
is
a
true.
roof over her head and
This
food.
is true. But in the context of the day, it did mean something high and noble,
Yeah.
right? So that's what they were speaking of. And part of the test was that she had to sleep on something like 12 mattresses or something, and they put a little pea underneath to see if she could still feel it. And
Yeah.
if she could feel it, she was worthy to be the princess. And in the morning, she woke up and was like, "Oh man, I really slept terribly last night. What an uncomfortable mattress." She slept on 12 mattresses with a little pea underneath and still felt it. And the symbolism there is that anyone fit to rule has to be able to feel the most minute bit of discomfort from those they serve, right? And if they're not able to feel that, they're not fit to rule or to lead, right? And that's the symbolism of it. It's not just a silly fairy tale. There's actually a deep truth
Right.
there. And I saw that for you last week when we were having this conversation. Is you're one who feels so deeply, and I am as well. I'm not putting myself on par with yourself, but you do feel incredibly deeply. And while sometimes you might feel like that's a reason, it might tempt you to not do what you do. It's exactly why you're qualified to do, because of the depth of your ability to feel and empathize and resonate with the pain of people. It's exactly what makes you fit to do what you do. And I know I would have rather shared that with you off air, but I really just wanted to share it in this moment. It just kind of came to me and came out of my mouth. And but yeah. Anyways, I guess all that to say that also sometimes when you're one who feels that deeply, it also means you're allowed to take those moments of feeling joy in the simple pleasures of life that you might otherwise feel like you're not worthy to feel. And Christmas for me this year was something like that. And I really allowed myself to just feel it and to enjoy it. So, anyways. It's a long way of saying I had a good Christmas.
Good. Well, my princess is laying on 2 robes,
Hmm.
3 quilts, and a blanket
Hmm.
that all got thrown over onto the dog sofa
Hmm.
tonight because it's definitely a 2-dog night.
Hmm.
And she's sleeping very peacefully, so apparently there is no pee beneath her um, for her resting place tonight. But I don't even think she's going to help with the podcast. I really don't. I don't think she's going to do anything but just lay there and sleep for the entire hour
Mine
because
is
she's
as she usually is.
exhausted.
Yeah, mine is as she usually is, right outside of these two doors right here, breathing heavily while she waits for me to reemerge. That's what she does on Friday nights. She lays there and snores and breathes under the door, waiting for
Yeah.
me to come out.
Yeah. I hear you. No, she's worthless to me now, but she has toys
Hmm.
and she's snuggled up and she's so happy. And that brings me happiness.
Yes.
In terms of feeling compassion, um, in terms of feeling compassion, in terms of feeling empathy, the older I get, the more difficult it becomes
Mm,
for me. I don't think that it's the world that's getting more complicated. I think the world has always been terribly complicated and terribly sad. Uh, I just, as much as I always felt it, I feel like I feel it more now.
mhm,
Um, and I find myself being disgusted and being angry and being belligerent about it and demanding things to change when uh, I where do you start? Where do you start? I mean, Rupert and I have done world peace meditations together. You and I have done meditations together. And yes, I know for the people that are watching or listening, we both hope um, that it makes a modicum of difference, at least for the few minutes that we're engaged in the practice.
mm,
But I have I've begun to start to believe that it is more of a curse than it is a blessing. That it just brings a lot of pain. Um, I feel pained by so much that's going on, not just, I mean, not just in my own life and with my mom and this process that is ongoing, but also just the world at large. And you go through those cycles that we've talked about over and over again,
true. Yeah.
uh, where you get right to that verge of feeling hopeless, and then something splendid will happen and it lifts you up and out of it for at least a while,
Yeah.
at least a respite from. But you know me, I'm always honest,
Mhm,
and I have been very open with our family of viewers and my friends and my family that I'm really struggling through this.
yeah.
This has been a very difficult time for me, particularly the last couple of years.
Mhm,
So, that said, I want to thank you and Bill, our producer, and all of our viewers for every kindness extended, every moment that they spend lifting us up, being a part of what we're doing. I feel genuine love in my heart for anyone that gravitates to our our cyberspace and these messages and what can we do collectively
mhm.
to make things better. And you had some ideas about what you wanted to talk about tonight, so why don't you run with that, and if I have anything
Sure.
of value to interject, I will.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I want to say too, even before I get into, pardon me, excuse me,
I know it's hard. Me
I need to
too.
laugh. Got to lay off that pipe. No.
Yeah.
Um, before I get into even some of that, I feel you on everything you're saying, and in the work that I've done over the last several years, the last decade plus, well, and that extends back about 2 decades, even my career as a pastor, into about the last 7, 8 years, where I've been more of an itinerant, doing a lot of coaching and writing and things of that nature. Um, Boy, the amount of devastation that I've experienced just in the lives of individuals, it's overwhelming. And sometimes you
Yeah.
just, I mean, especially dealing with people who are coming out of very cult-like situations. And I mean, damn it, even this just last, I woke up October. Actually, it was October 7th, I believe it. And I had this. Was it October 7th? Was when everything happened in
In
Israel, right?
Israel, yes.
So it was that morning or the morning before. I'm not trying to make a false history here, but it was right in that period of time. It was before it happened though. And I woke up with this sense to go to a certain page in a certain book, and I read it, and it was basically just about PTSD being caused, one of the causes of PTSD just being when you see the evil that human beings are capable of, and you're just like, what? Especially when you're a very trusting individual, right? And
Yeah.
you just kind of have this naive, like, as old as I get and as much absolute barbarity as I've seen from people, I still have this rather naive view of humanity sometimes, where I
Mhm.
just imagine, people are basically good. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
maybe that's just the hopeful part of me. And
Yeah,
then
maybe it is.
and maybe it is, but I've seen the absolute worst of the worst, but I always default back to that. Like, some default to original sin. I seem to default to original goodness. And it's like, certainly the balance is obviously it's balanced. It's somewhere in the middle. But I woke up with just this sense of, get ready to see the worst of people and prepare yourself for it. And it was like a day later or that morning, whenever it was, I'd have to look in my journal to look at when it actually fell. But I was just taken aback by what I saw. It wasn't too long after that. If it wasn't the same day, again, I'd have to like look at my notes, where a very prominent leader in one of the Christian movements that I came from, who, trust me, I've seen the hucksters and the shysters and the snake oil salesmen.
Yeah.
I've had my fair share of them. I've seen them, the fake prophets, the people who get up and give words to people based on cards they collected and people's names and addresses, all the fake BS that
Yeah.
I've had my fill of all of that crap. And I can usually spot those people because I've seen them. I've had them in
Yeah.
as speakers and found
Yeah.
out behind the scenes what they were up to. And I know how those BSers operate. But this particular individual, even though I disagreed with them theologically 2000%, I always at the very least viewed as being a moral person, a person whose heart was in the right place, even if their theology was, let's say, askew, at least from my perspective. But it came out this person had been involved in terrible, terrible things, terrible things. And that the whole network of churches and everything that they'd found had been involved in and I was like shocked because I'm not involved in this. I'm 10 years removed from this movement, but even so, it had such an impact on me. All that to say, like, man, sometimes looking at the horrors that you have to look at in order to help the people that you're called or that you've chosen to help, however one chooses to look at that, it does a number on you. It really does a number on you. And you have got to have a strong, strong spirit and to be able to endure it. We have to give ourselves credit for the fact that we're still standing at all. It means we're stronger than we think we are, because some of this pressure would have crushed other people already. And also in those moments, you really just have to shrink down the kind of window you're looking through for any kind of satisfaction in regards to anything at all, because the huge worldwide like reward that maybe we want, everything, so the millennial reign of Christ, peace, goodwill towards men, that's probably not what we're going to see. And so you have to reduce your expectations down to something as simple but as deep and profound as Princess Peanut Butter Cup, who loves you, as my dog Lucy, who loves me, who every night is laying on my legs to the point where I can't sleep and it drives me nuts, but I love her,
Yeah.
to my cats, who sometimes I have just had enough of, but at the same point, I love them. Sometimes you really got to reduce it. You got to shrink it down. And you're like, oh, okay, right here, right now, in this moment, that is the aperture through which joy is streaming to me.
Yeah.
And it's not this worldwide thing right now. One day I'll see something like that. But for this moment, in this moment, that's what it is. Father
Mhm.
Richard Rohr, a beautiful author and teacher, in his book, The Universal Christ, dedicates it to his dog who had passed earlier that year. And he said, to me, she was the Christ. And that it's like the only book I've ever read that the dedication is better than the book itself, because it says everything he tries to say in the book, which is that sometimes that deepest thing to you, that most important and profound thing to you, is found in that which everyone else would think as being the most insignificant, but it's not at all. That is the portal through which joy, heaven, God, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
streams to you. And sometimes it's in moments where everything goes to hell around us that we find that opening again. And we're like, okay, back to the source. That's where it's at. And from here in the micro, we can spread out to the macro, but we get to rediscover it there. And so, to anyone else who's feeling that and enduring that, look around you. Look around you for those windows and those portals where joy is streaming in a smaller way than maybe you want for it to be streaming to you, but it's definitely there. Hans Urs von Balthasar said that the poor are satisfied with little gifts, and he's speaking of the parable of those who are poor in spirit. And he's talking about the imagery of blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God, right? Sometimes poverty of spirit just means when you're in that place where you have nothing. And that's when you actually find the kingdom of God, because it's found in the smallest things, and you don't see it in the smallest of things when everything is wonderful, right? So sometimes privation serves a purpose, even if it's a purpose we have to look for, even if it's not one that's ordained, if that makes sense. Anyways, that was just for free. Anyways, we had talked a little bit about, talking about New Year's stuff, right? And we're going into 2024. And of course, anytime you're talking about New Year's, everybody wants to talk resolutions and moving forward and what's the vision and what's the plan and where are we going in the coming year. And I'm a person who's been in different places in my life. I've been in the places in my life where I'm like, okay, 2020, whatever, 20, whatever, 19, whatever, this is the year for this, that, or the other. And then I've had other years where I've had to just be like, it's a number, and both of those are acceptable. Both of those are acceptable positions based on where you're at in your life.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I want to say is there's a great story in the Gospels, and it's told, I think, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. I don't think it's in the Gospel of John. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, where Jesus and his disciples, they're walking on the Sabbath day, and the Sabbath day being Saturday, the Shabbat. And on this day, travel is limited, activity is limited. It's a day of rest, right? So you can only travel 3/4 of a mile. You can't ignite a fire. There's a lot of things you can't do because it's meant to be a day of rest that celebrates and sort of acknowledges the. My screen just went black. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. But it's a day that's supposed to sort of honor and acknowledge the seventh day of creation, where Yahweh is said to have rested from his works. Yada yada yada. So anyways, they're traveling on the Sabbath day. They're hungry, and they come upon a field of wheat or grain, and they reach out and they take the heads of grain and they eat them because they're hungry. And there's a bunch of religious leaders standing by who sort of pop up like little demonic puppets, and they're like, hey, you're doing what's unlawful on the Sabbath. You're not supposed to be plucking heads of grain on the Sabbath and eating them. That's violation of this law, that law, or the other law. And Jesus is like, hey, have you not read in Hosea, I think 6:6, where God says, I desire mercy and not sacrifice? He's like, if you had known what that means, you wouldn't have condemned the innocent. And so what Jesus basically says there is like, hey, you think life is all about sacrifice. You think life is all about a God up there who demands you sacrifice to him. And as a result of that, you see the world as a world to which you must sacrifice in order to get things back from it. So you live in an economy of exchange that begins with your vision of the divine. You think the divine demands sacrifice from you that you have to give upwards, and then it will pour downwards. And then you view the world like that as well, right? You must make sacrifice in order to receive. He's like, but the real way it works is mercy, not sacrifice. So it's not you give up and then up comes down. It's up comes down in mercy, and then you give upwards in thanksgiving. And then when you learn that principle, you learn to interact with the world that way. You don't need anything from anyone in order to give to them. You give because it's your joy to give. You're a merciful person. He was like, if you would have understood this principle, you wouldn't have condemned us for reaching out our hands and partaking of the mercy that's inherent in creation itself, right? He's like, it's the mercy of God that this is here and that we can partake of it when we're hungry. But you're so hung up on a law and the keeping of a law that you see this as unlawful. And, the Sabbath was meant to be a gift to humanity. Rest. This is a day of rest. Every other day was a day of work. This is a day of rest. It was actually like a subversion of, law codes from other Mesopotamian kingdoms and whatnot. Anyways, long story short, Jesus then says, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And to me, that's such a revolutionary statement, because Jesus says, look, this day was made for you. You are not made for this day. This day was given to you as mercy, not as something that you must offer in sacrifice. So, if this day ever becomes burdensome, right? If rest ever becomes a burden, then stop resting and do
Mhm.
whatever, you know what I mean? Like if your weekend ever becomes burdensome to you, then start, I don't know if that makes sense, but like the Sabbath day had become such a burden to those living in the first century via certain religious authorities that it just became a list of things you couldn't do versus here's something you can do, right? Rest. And if rest for you looks like tilling your fields, which you don't normally have time to do, or doing this, which you might not otherwise have time to do, then do that. But it became such a burden where it was like you couldn't do anything, right? And you were just like,
Mhm.
you became a captive of the day. So it was like you were made for the day rather than the day being made for you. And Jesus is like, look, this day was made for humanity, not humanity for the day. And what I always like to say is that's the fourth commandment: honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. So
Mhm.
Jesus broke the fourth law. And in breaking the fourth law, he broke the fourth wall. And in theater terms, in cinematic terms, breaking the
Mhm.
fourth wall is when an actor in the play or the movie turns and acknowledges the
The
audience.
audience.
Yeah, and lets them in on the secret that we all know, which is that this is all happening for you, right? If you weren't watching, this wouldn't be going on, right? What you're watching happen on the stage, if you weren't sitting in the audience, no one would be here performing this unless it were a practice. But even that's really
Mhm.
for you. So the breaking of the fourth wall lets the audience know this is all about you, not about us on stage. And the way that we treat religious observances and feasts and laws is that this is for God, that this would be happening even if we weren't here. And what Jesus shows here is that no, 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 no. This was made for you, not you for it. So this wouldn't be happening if you weren't here. This is given to you as a gift. So in any time, whenever the gift becomes a burden, throw the gift away
Mhm.
and do what is not burdensome, and then that becomes the new gift. Now that's a long way of saying, but I wanted to lay the principle out there that things like the new year, the changing of the calendar year, was made for us, not us for it, right? So there are
Mhm.
times when you need a reset. There are times when you need to start fresh. And the turning of the year is a pretty good time to do that, right? Because everything starts over again. It's like what we've been talking about, the cycles. You're going up on the piano, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, and then you're back to do. You started at a lower do, now you're at a higher do. It's like you go up the scales, now you start over again. You're up an octave, but you're back at do, right? That will bring us back to do, right? The sound of music. So
Sound
we're
of
about
music.
ready to come back to, yeah, we're about ready to come back to do again, January, the beginning of another year. And so it's a great way to mentally reset, right? And say, okay, you know what? The past is in the past. What's happened, happened. And now we're starting anew. Now we're starting afresh. And you can set your intention. Some people think, now some might disagree with me here, but this is just the way that I believe I create my own reality. I
Mhm.
really, truly do. I think there's laws we're all
We all
subject
do.
to. Yeah. Yep. And I think there's laws we're all subject to. I think there are certainly certain seasons that are different than other seasons. But ultimately, I think that we are called to live above seasons, that we can choose what season we're in sometimes. Now, sometimes there's mental things and there's other things that inhibit us, and it's okay to let those be what they are. I'm not trying to put any guilt or shame or anything on anyone. But I mean, under normal, quote unquote, normal circumstances, we can choose our direction. And so let's say we did particularly crappy with money in the last year, right? We didn't save nearly as much as we should have. We went more and more into whatever. I don't know. I'm just picking an example, or our health or whatever. Okay. Well, when you start that new year, you can say, okay, this is a reset or this is a restarting. Okay. From this year is going to be the year that I get my finances in order, that I say blah, 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 blah. Whatever the goal is, you can do that and you can make that change. And the changing of that year, there's a mental switch you can flip, and it's a powerful thing. And that exists for you. And I say that to say, it's not that this year is destined to be one thing or the other. It's that it exists for you to make it what you will. to make it what it is you need it to be for your well-being, for your family's well-being, for the well-being of those around you. You get to decide what it is. And I grew up in a charismatic Pentecostal tradition where at the turn of the year, everybody wanted to make predictions about what the coming year was. And it usually came through preachers who were huffing and puffing and losing their breath in the microphone and being like, 2010 is going to be the year that blah, blah, blah. I don't know. But literally, that's how it was like, it's 2007 and we're going to heaven. It's 2008 and it's going to be great. I don't know. I'm making up crap. But it was stuff like that, and it was like, it always had to rhyme with the year. And I was always like, well, what are you going to do when it starts to all end in teen? Because nothing really rhymes with that. But whatever. They found a way around it. But it was like, it was always like this next year is going to be this specific thing. And then we all kind of have to fall in line with this vision. And I was like, no, that's not really what I'm feeling this year is for me. And I say that to say that it's for you, you're not for it. You get to choose what it's going to be. And circumstances are going to enter your life regardless of what you choose for the year to be. And they're going to do what they do to you. But like, I'm just saying that to say, like, you're not enslaved to a season or to something that's it has to be this. You can choose the direction you're going to go, and you can choose something, you can aim at it, and you can go for it. And even like, magic practitioners, and even the goal of ritual magic, even if you look into it, which might be something that appeals more to certain listeners, is to break free from the sign that you're born under. I mean, that's really what magical practitioners seek to do. Now, that's not to say that those things aren't important and don't guide you, but like, there was a sense the ancients had of being enslaved to a certain destiny that was laid out for them due to what they were born under. And people began to have this ache in them. Like, that isn't the direction I feel. And people are like, well, it doesn't matter what you feel. That's what you're destined for. And so, part of ritual magic was this desire to break free from that. It's breaking free of the wheel of samsara. It's also why the Apostle Paul said that, look, you're not a slave to seasons and this, that, or the other. You can, follow Christ wherever you want to go, basically. So I say that to say the turning of the calendar year is a gift to you. You're not a gift to it. You're not its puppet. It is something that you can use as a tool to take a new path if that's what you want to do. Now, there might be certain things that are laid out and destined for you to walk in this year. And I do believe things like that are true. And I do believe things like that are real. But I think for the most part, we are given freedom to be collaborators or co-laborers with the divine, which means we get to co-create with it. And so for some of you, there are things that you have in your spirit to do, you have in your heart to do in the coming year, and you need to use the stroke of midnight on December 31st into January 1 as a moment where you flip a switch. Okay, what I was, I'm not anymore. Now listen, there's going to be others of you, though, that is a burden too heavy to bear because of where you're at right now, right? Where you're at mentally, where you're at emotionally. And I've had times where I've done what I just said. And then I've also had times where I had to say, it's a number on the calendar, because I just did not have the mental or spiritual strength to do it, right? And to feel like I had to make some big grand shift, because for some listening, everything I just said sounds exhausting. And I'll admit, even just saying it myself, I was a little exhausted saying it,
Well,
because go ahead.
I'm conflicted because it's not that I disagree. But I also think that time is an illusion, and that the space-time continuum has no relevance to the calendar that we use as a human machination, something that we dreamed up based on the movement of the solar system that works for us for now to measure our lives. But it's an assigned number. Just like when you walk into high school, you get an assigned home room with a number over the door, and that's your home room.
Right.
But it's not something that you chose. It was something that somebody made up to make the system work better.
Yeah.
And proof of that, as I've said many times, is that we have to finagle with our own time continuum and calendar
Yes.
every 4 years to make it work,
Hmm.
or we end up getting a day behind over the course of time, and before you know it, you've lost a month and everything's all screwed up. And so,
Absolutely.
but if that is the case, and I believe that it is,
Hmm.
that time is something that we try to harness and uh, utilize as a
Hmm.
concept
Yeah.
to measure our finite existence on this planet, then it stands to reason and follows logically that every night at the stroke of midnight can be your own personal New Year's Eve, your
Absolutely.
own reset button, your
Yes.
own, okay, I'm starting tomorrow fresh because today sucked and
Yep.
I don't want this anymore and I want
Yep.
this burden released. And,
Absolutely.
whether you pray about it or you meditate about it, or, just spend a few minutes introspectively trying to hit that, the easy button, the reset button, the
Hmm.
default button, that button, um, then it doesn't matter if there's cut crystal that's slowly descending into Times Square, or
Right.
fireworks going off in Sydney, Australia, and
Yep.
every place in between. Um, each day is a fresh start. Each day is
Yes.
a gift.
I
Each
agree with you
day.
100%.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah.
And
And
it
yeah.
doesn't matter, but
No, and I do it every morning.
ritualistically,
Yeah.
we
Mhm.
as a world community mark
Yep.
the new year. We have globally agreed that
Yep.
this system works and
Mhm.
we're gonna follow this system.
Exactly. Yep. And that's why I say it exists for you. It's a tool that you can use, not you for it. It's not something you're enslaved to. And so if you're at a point where you need to, like I said, just simply say it's a number on the calendar because you are not in that mental space where you can bear that burden, then that's okay too, you know? But if you do need that reset, it serves as an opportunity to do it. But I do it every morning. I do it every morning when I take a shower and I put my head into the water, I reset, and I say it's a new day, and I'm a new man and this is a new opportunity to live and serve and love. I do that every morning. And so every moment is an opportunity to do that if we see it as such. But this is sort of a grander thing that's kind of ingrained in all of our inner cycles and internal clock that we can utilize, for that purpose. And you know, but like exactly like you said, you can do it every day. That every sundown is an
Yeah,
eve that births the Christ, so to speak. You know what I mean? Every
yeah,
sundown is the dark womb out of which can come a new creation, if that's how you choose to see it. And that is how I choose to see it. And it's interesting how we've changed the day based on the work week, right? Or based on the work day, that the day begins or the day ends at midnight, right?
mhm.
Because that was all reset to actually train us to be 40-hour a week, wage slaves, no offense. And I work a regular job as well, so I'm not dogging that lifestyle. But that's why things have been reconfigured in that way. Ah, there she is. Um,
Dogging the lifestyle. That's
yeah,
what I'm doing right now.
yeah.
Okay, you
But
stay right here, no barking.
our ancient ancestors, saw the day as ending at sundown and the new day beginning at
Mhm.
sundown. So that would usually be about 6 to 7 p.m. is when the day would end and the new day would begin. And so the day began in the darkness, right? The day didn't begin when the sun came up. The day began in darkness. And so every sundown, every dark season of life can be a new beginning if we choose to see it that way. This is
Mhm.
just as you said, an agreed upon more macrocosmic
Yeah.
thing that's universal, and it's part of all of our internal clocks where we can say, okay, you know what, I'm going to start afresh, I'm going to start anew. And also, like I said, for some that might be too big of a burden because of where you're at right now, mentally and emotionally and spiritually and otherwise. And it's okay for you to just say, you know what, I'm going to just go to bed and not worry about what's going on in Times Square. And I'm going to wake up in the morning and have my coffee and treat. It was exactly 44:44 when I just looked up at the clock. Um, and I'm just going to live I'm just going to live like it's any other day, because that might be
Mhm.
what's best for you in that season. And I
Yeah.
guess that's what I mean by using that parable from the Gospels early on, is that it's for you. You're not for it. You can
Mhm.
choose what you do with it. It's not something that has you. It's something that you have that you can use if it benefits you in that season, if that makes sense.
Yep, it absolutely does. And I think that in a lot of ways, we give ourselves, in terms of this thinking, this process, this release, it gives us permission to let ourselves off the hook.
Yeah, yeah.
It gives us permission to extend that grace to ourselves,
Mhm.
which ultimately makes it much easier to extend that same grace to others.
No, you're 100% right, because we need triggers, don't we? We need
Yes,
those we
yes,
need those things as human beings.
yep.
That's
And
why we put up. Yeah, go ahead.
we're so superstitious. We're so conformist. We're
Yep.
so does that work for you? Okay, well then it works for me. We're complacent, compliant. We're trying to follow along the same way. I know that you pitched in on the clock for Bill for Christmas, back ordered on Amazon, back ordered on Amazon. He's
Mhm.
telling us 5 minutes, 3 minutes,
Hmm.
and we got like a little bit of a late start anyway.
Wow. Okay.
But I do believe that there's been some kind of a shock to his system that has finagled with his electronics. Not just mine on this end,
Yeah.
but he's telling us 3 minutes.
We
So
are
we'll
talking about the malleability and illusory nature of time too,
of
so I don't know.
time,
Maybe we're doing it. Maybe we're screwing it up. Yeah.
and that could be, but more likely on his end, more likely.
No
Uh,
offense.
but he will. Okay, there you are, and there you are.
I got lots of clocks.
Yeah.
But Happy New Year to both of you and to the
Happy New Year.
audience that's viewing this and listening to this. I just wanted to come on and say that because, Jeff, we exit really fast to get
Yeah.
to World Awakening. So I just wanted to throw that to you personally while we're here. And Happy New Year to you and your family.
Yes, you too, sir.
And
Same.
now we have 2 minutes.
All right.
Bye.
Love you, baby.
Hmm.
How lucky are we to have this family of our friends and, like-minded individuals that are open to
Mhm.
Soul School, are open to learning, maybe thinking about something a little differently than they ever have before, thinking at all about anything. I think
Yeah.
is always preferable to plunging your head in the sand and learning nothing, because it's just the easy way out.
Yeah.
So, I give everybody who's been with us all year in
Yes.
2023 an A plus for effort,
Yeah.
just for effort. We made it through another difficult year in the
Yeah.
life. And Happy New Year.
Yeah.
And I love you all. And
Yeah.
there it is for tonight and for 2023. Class
Yes.
dismissed.
Yes. Ditto on all of that. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Mhm.